up across the internet. Then we'll get started on this lovely Monday. We always need to wait just a little bit of time until things get fired up across the internet on Facebook, on Periscope, which I thought was going away, but apparently that's still here. I thought that was supposed to be done in March. Maybe that is coming up in the queue. But YouTube always takes a little bit to get started, and it looks like we're alive and well. So let's get rocking and rolling. Hello, my friends, and welcome back to yet another episode of Watching the Watchers Live. My name is Robert Gruler. I am a criminal defense attorney here at the R&R Law Group in the always beautiful and sunny Scottsdale, Arizona, where my team and I, over the course of many years, have represented thousands of good people facing criminal charges. And throughout our time in practice, we have seen a lot of problems with our justice system. I'm talking about misconduct involving the police. We have prosecutors behaving poorly. We have judges not particularly interested in a little thing called justice. And it all starts with the politicians, the people at the top, the ones who write the rules and pass the laws that they expect you and I to follow, but sometimes have a little bit of difficulty doing so themselves. And so that's why we started this show called Watching the Watchers, so that together with your help, we can shine that big, beautiful spotlight of accountability and transparency back down upon our very system with the hope of finding justice. And we're grateful that you are here and with us today. We've got a lot to get into, a lot of news over the weekend, and in particular about the border. So we're going to be spending a lot of time talking about that. Before we do, of course, we got to get up to speed on what's going on with Derek Chauvin. Today was day 11. And we got juror number 14. So we have a full panel. The judge has said that they want to add another number 15 juror on there, just in case in the time period between now and Monday, if somebody drops out, well, then they've got a full 14 going in on Monday. So we're going to be looking for one more tomorrow, but we've got 14. That's our full panel. The 15th person is not going to be with the panel. They're going to be let go as soon as opening arguments start. So that's kind of like the worst job ever. We'll get into that. Then we're going to change gears. We're going to talk a little bit more about the Biden border crisis is trending on Twitter right now. And a lot of people kind of on both sides of the aisle are getting a little bit agitated with what the Biden administration is doing as it pertains to the border, because there is a burgeoning problem taking place right now. New images came out today from a couple people. One is a representative from Texas, a Democratic congressperson, leaked some images that are spreading around the internet today. And Project Veritas also came out with a new video and their own report about what's taking place really down at the southern border. You may recall for a long time, we were hearing just over and over and over again how Donald Trump was such a racist Hitlerian monster that he was responsible for putting a bunch of kids in cages. Well, now it kind of looks like that is going on still. And we're going to see if we can see potentially maybe the same people who were up in arms hyperventilating about it during the Trump years. We're going to see if they're out there and making a ruckus in this new situation. So we're going to talk a lot about that. Then lastly, we're going to change gears. We're going to talk about the Boston Marathon bombing. This took place back in 2013, and you may be asking yourself, what the heck why are we still talking about this? Well, if you recall, there were a pair of brothers who were involved in that bombing. One of them died in the aftermath of the bombing, and the younger brother is still kind of being kicked around our justice system. And so the Supreme Court today issued a whole slew of orders about what cases they're going to hear in the upcoming term. And one of the brothers' case was on there. They're going to hear this case, and it pertains to the death penalty. So we want to break that down a little bit, get up to speed on what happened with the Boston bombing, so that we can be prepared when the Supreme Court does hear this case. So we've got a lot to get into. As always, quick reminder, if you want to ask a question during this broadcast, if you have anything you want to chime in on, a comment, anything you want to share, the best place to do that is over at our platform at locals.com. There's a Watching the Watchers community over there where you can sign up, support the show, share links throughout the day, download a free copy of my book. Also, ask questions where we're going to be taking those. Those are going to be incorporated into the slides today. So go on over there. The main address is watchingthewatchers.locals.com. Check us out. Get a copy of these slides at the end of the broadcast. All right, so let's get into the news of the day. Derek Chauvin, day 11. We have now 14 jurors. And remember, a full panel is 12. We have 12 plus 2 alternates. And so we have a full panel ready to go. Opening arguments are scheduled for 1 week from today. So that is going to be March 29th. And that's going to kick off the trial. Tomorrow, the judge is going to give us some additional rulings on some sort of some issues that are still out there, and they're going to pick a 15th juror if they can, just in case something happens between now and Monday. So from Monday to Monday, we've got 7 days. Maybe the city council does something also stupid again, like they did with that settlement conference news released right in the middle of voir dire. Maybe something else will happen, and so one of the jurors will be somebody who is no longer going to be fair and impartial. And so if the judge had 15, let's say that happens to one person, they boot the one person off. Now we have a full panel of 14, which gives us the 12 plus the 2 alternates. And so the judge is being super cautious. So today we got juror number 14. We're going to break that down. We're going to show you a little bit about her. Not a really interesting day today in the Chauvin trial, if I can be candid. Pretty basic stuff. Judge issued a blanket ruling denying a change of venue. We already knew that was coming, but apparently over the weekend, the defense team filed a whole slew of motions. It sounds like affidavits and memorandums and motions and a bunch of offers of proof and a bunch of stuff to support their justification for changing it from Minneapolis to a different city in Minnesota. And so the judge came out today and just sort of put a blanket no on that, not going to do that. And he's going to issue more orders throughout the week. So we're going to see some of this stuff in writing. The judge gave us very, very basic verbal, oral argument or oral orders today, but it's going to be fleshed out, I think, throughout the rest of the week. But today largely was jury selection, and several people obviously did not make the jury. We had one new woman, a white woman, who makes up juror number 14. And so let's take a quick look at the board. This is our Derek Chauvin trial board, and you can see here the main parties didn't change a whole lot. There are still some other attorneys here on the prosecution side that we haven't just filled out yet. We'll see if they start to pop up as the trial unfolds. But right now, they're really just kind of on the side, in the wings. And the rest of these people are really doing voir dire. So right now, we're still just wrapping up voir dire, and we're talking about jury selection. We have one additional juror that the judge is going to pick, hopefully tomorrow or Wednesday. And then we'll have our full panel. But as you can see, we have the genders and the sort of racial demographics as best as we can figure those out. Those are listed here in the jury panel. And then we've got, of course, the main parties. Eric Nelson, heard a lot from him, the only defense attorney that we've seen on the Chauvin side. And then today we saw a lot of Steve Schleicher and I think a little bit of Matthew Frank. He was sort of the poking around back there, but mostly Steve has been doing jury selection. So as I mentioned, the day started off sort of bland, kind of very, uneventful. But this is Judge Cahill giving us a brief sort of overview early this morning about that change of venue. And remember, change of venue is something that a lot of people have been kind of up in arms about, saying that there is no way, shape, or form that Derek Chauvin gets a fair trial in Minneapolis just because of everything that's been going on. Obviously, this is national news. George Floyd died right there. They're having a trial right there. All of the protests, all of the unrest, all of the memorials and the peaceful gatherings took place right there. And now we're asking jurors and everybody to come in there and sort of live under this burgeoning weight of the pressure surrounding this trial, however you want to define that. So, but many people were saying, well, we got to move it out. We got to just get it out of here. We got to take it to a different city, send it across the state where it's a smaller town or something to that effect, hopefully to mitigate some of that volume, to turn down the intensity a little bit. And judge is basically saying, no, it's not going to happen. And we didn't think that was going to happen anyways, just because they have gone through a lot to beef up the security around this court building. They've got barbed wire and concrete barricades and chain link fencings. And a lot of people, I think I heard from a headline somewhere that there were like 11 different law enforcement departments and agencies that were going to be, taking additional time to come in and beef up security. And that is starting 1 week from today. So March 29th. Today, the judge this morning said, well, here's our final ruling on the venue stuff, but you're going to notice he didn't really get into the details. Not a lot of specifics here, but he does promise that later in the week, we're going to get some official rulings, and we're waiting on those because there's some important issues here that I think are going to be flushed out. He just wasn't able to get to it over the weekend, so those will be forthcoming. Here is Judge Cahill talking about the change of venue motion.
Hey everybody, we are on the record. The jurors are just finishing up their video, so we'll be bringing them in shortly for the group instruction, followed by individual instruction. But I did want to make a record that after Friday, I know the defense filed extensive briefs, affidavits, attachments regarding change of venue. And I had a chance to review those this weekend. And it does not change my decision, and so the motion for change of venue is still denied. And we will hopefully get you out written orders regarding the Spiegel, the reverse Spiegel, and the motions in limine this week by tomorrow or Wednesday. So with that, as soon as the jurors are ready, we'll bring them in. Anything else for the record before we do that? All right.
All right, so that's it. One of the most boring clips that we've ever played on this show, but it just kind of shows you what's going on here, right? It sounds like the defense submitted a bunch of stuff over the weekend. And this happens a lot to defense lawyers. You work hard on something, you draft all of these documents, you just pour your heart and soul into this document. Judge, this is the best legal argument I've ever seen. This is why this is so critical. Here is this phone book of information. Please just look at it with your heart and just give us a fair consideration. Judge comes back in Monday morning, says, hey, yeah, I saw all that stuff over the weekend. It's still denied. Thanks for playing, though. I'll get you an order later. Let's get back to jury selection. It happens all the time for defense attorneys and prosecutors and all lawyers, to be fair. But Eric Nelson, you saw him there on the defense table just kind of going, all right, well, yeah, I guess we'll just get right back to it. All right, so they call in the first juror, and they went through a number of different jurors today. Not going to go through all of them. Let's talk about the people who did not make it. So this woman here, Nelson, used one of his discretionary strikes to excuse the morning's first potential juror. She was a nursing assistant who is white, was firm in her pledge to judge the case only on evidence presented, saying, I can look at it from both sides, look at the facts, and go from there. She revealed that she marched in a protest about a week after Floyd's death. So there you go, marched in a protest a week after Floyd's death and carried a sign. Also said she saw the widely watched bystander video of Floyd's arrest, gave this impression in the juror questionnaire she filled out months back, said, quote, it was not his time to die, and the incident should not have gone as far as it did. So, of course, Nelson used one of his peremptory strikes and booted her off of the potential jury. Obviously a good move. So that is, we've seen this kind of come out many times throughout voir dire, throughout this jury selection process, where people literally say that they grabbed a sign and went down and marched on behalf of George Floyd. Obviously, those people are biased. Obviously, that's a pretty in-depth confirmation that you believe a certain way, so much so that you just didn't post on Facebook about it. You didn't tell your friends about it over dinner. You actually got a sign and went down and marched. And so to undo that, I think is probably an order that is just too difficult to fulfill. And so Eric Nelson made the right move and booted her out of the jury. The prosecution also used one of their peremptory strikes. And here we have, it says the prosecution followed and used one of its strikes to dismiss the day's second jury candidate, a father whose passion for competitive fishing made for congenial small talk with the attorneys. The man, who is white, said he has seen very little news coverage about Floyd's death or the civil unrest that followed. So that's pretty amazing. And he couldn't recall ever seeing the viral video. Wow, he might be the only person in America who didn't see it, and he's not on the jury. That's interesting. With that, he said he could be a fair-minded juror. Everything is based on how it's presented within the trial, he said. The man, who services and repairs pumps for a good-sized company in the Twin Cities, characterized the view of Chauvin as neutral on his questionnaire. Not so much for Black Lives Matter movement, writing, I do not think the riots helped. Asked whether he still associates the riots with the movement, he said, I would have to say I possibly do. Yeah, and I don't actually blame him for that. I mean, I think that it's hard to sort of disassociate the two because we still don't really know what the movements are all about or what the intents are behind it, unfortunately. So those two people were gone. The only man in America who didn't see the video, not on the jury. All right, well, that's okay. So next up, we got a couple other people who got booted off. My emoji, she is not escaping this box, by the way. She's supposed to be in this box. She did not make it on the jury. Looks like she's really intending to do that, but she's not going to be on it. The day's third prospective juror told the court that, quote, my English is not perfect. I might not understand all the words. Cahill quizzed her a bit further in the area and then soon excused her. The afternoon began with a man dismissed by the judge after he said that he would not be able to put out of his mind the settlement. There it is again, the settlement agreement that the family reached with the city because, quote, it swayed my opinion that they got that much money. Yeah, $27 million. Of course it's going to sway your opinion. The next jury candidate also made a quick exit under questioning by Cahill. The man said he was leaning towards Chauvin being guilty. He explained himself with an analogy of brothers who sometimes get into a scrap. You're tussling with your brother, the man began, and he gives up. You stop. If you don't and something happens and you're standing in front of your parents, there is a line where you have to stop. Before excusing the juror, Cahill said, as a little brother to three older brothers, I know exactly what you are talking about. So those three individuals not on the jury either. Cahill was a younger brother. I'm an older brother, the oldest of three. And we all kind of know that line that he's talking about. But of course, you cannot bring that into a jury trial. You have to view it on the facts, on the merits that are in front of you. And so those three individuals apparently could not do that, and so they got booted out. Now, here is juror number 14. So she did make it on. So let's learn a little bit about her. Then we have a line of questioning from the prosecutor where we learn a little bit more about sort of how her views changed on one particular topic. So this is juror number 14. Once again, this is all being reported by the Star Tribune. They do a nice job. Number 14 is a white woman in her 20s. She is a newlywed and a social worker in Wright County whose clients are coping with mental health difficulties. Interesting. We talk a lot about mental health and about, the police responding to mental health crises. And so she's got some experience in this area, closely related. She was unwavering in her confidence that she could judge only the evidence presented in the trial, and added that her profession has provided her with the ability to be empathetic and keep an open mind about people. Quote, "I'm always thinking about the person and where he came from," she said of viewpoint about Chauvin. Was it his training? As for Floyd, she said, quote, "I'm always looking at why someone has done something a certain way. I had all kinds of thoughts of him, his past with drugs and things like that. I had every emotion." When the woman said hearing both sides would definitely help her to be fair and impartial to Chauvin, the defense attorney reminded her that his client does not need to present his side during the trial. The woman explained, "Mr. Chauvin's side is his presumption of innocence. That is what I meant by that," which is a very interesting statement. I've explained this before on the show, I think probably many times more than many people would want to, I don't know. I've talked about this a lot, but many jurors get confused on this issue about the presumption of innocence. And I've explained that many times you'll go into a jury trial and you'll be asking the jurors questions. And one of the first things that the judge will ask is, how many people here already think the defendant is guilty? Right before the trial starts. And you'll get a couple people on the jury who raise their hand and go, yeah, I do, honestly. He wouldn't be here if he didn't do something wrong. It may not be the charges that are being brought against him, but he wouldn't be in handcuffs. I mean, the police don't just arrest innocent people. I know that, obviously. And so the person who's sitting here in this courtroom must be guilty because they're here. And you're going to get people on the jury panel who raise their hand over that. Then the judge will say, well, how many? Okay, that's fair. All right, and explain to them. We all know that those people are getting thrown off the panel. Then they go to the next question. Well, how many people think they don't know? They don't know. It's too soon to tell. It's too early. We haven't even started opening arguments yet. How many people say they don't know? And about the rest of the panel typically raises their hand. They go, yeah, that's me. Yeah, I don't know. It's a good question. I'm here. I'm trying to be fair and impartial. And so we're going to get to the bottom of this, but I don't know whether he's innocent or guilty. I just can't tell yet. It's too early. That's the wrong answer. He's innocent at that moment in time. And so the judges will come back and say, okay, well, you're all wrong. Actually, he's innocent. So who else thinks that he's innocent? You maybe will get one or two of those people who raise their hands. Sometimes the judge doesn't even ask that because most of the panel has raised their hand at that point in time. So it's that concept. In court right now, every single juror should have a fair understanding that Derek Chauvin is presumed innocent. It's the presumption of innocent. It is a pillar of our justice system. It is so critical, so important. Sounds like this woman is familiar with that concept, and she's going to be adhering to that burden moving forward. So that's good news. So that is juror number 14. Here's a little bit of her today in court. Here's a prosecutor, Steve Schleicher, asking her some questions about her questionnaire and some follow-ups.
Just a few follow-up, Your Honor. You'd indicated that in your experience, when you've had to call law enforcement in and they've removed somebody who was unruly, in all instances, the person complied with the police.
Yes.
Can you tell me what your thoughts would be on someone who does not comply with the police when they, come in and on your request are trying to remove a person who's being unruly?
I think it depends on the situation. Since I've not experienced it, I'm not quite sure how I would react to that, but I would hope that I would be able to work with law enforcement like they would be able to work with me to be able to get that person to just be in a better state and feel better about anything, but I've not had that experience, so I'm not sure.
And some people may hold the view that if you're not complying with the police when they ask you or tell you to do something and you get injured, you kind of get what's coming to you. Tell me what your thoughts are.
I think I used to think that, but I don't necessarily believe that anymore. Again, because we should all have that respect. You should respect the officer telling you something as much as the flip side. So I think that's my view on that.
Can you tell me why you may have re-examined that view?
I'm not quite sure what that. I think maybe just hearing both sides again. I don't really know if there's something specific I can point out to why that changed.
Okay. Thank you, Your Honor.
All right. So did you notice that? I'm not going to play it again, but if you notice this, he says, well, what prompted that change? So apparently there's something going on where the woman said, well, you know, if there was an original thought that maybe if you're disobeying the police, you get what's coming to you, that changed a little bit. And he goes, well, what caused that to change? It sounds like now maybe you're a little bit less pro-police, maybe that you actually don't get what's coming to you when the police are involved. And he says, what caused that to change? And she goes, well, you know, I don't know. It's just sort of a natural evolution. And he just goes, you see that face? He goes, like, okay, there it is. Right. What could it be? What could possibly change it? Is it the fact that she's now in court being questioned to be on a jury? I don't know. But you can obviously understand why people's positions might moderate a little bit if they do want to be on a jury. And so this prosecutor noticed that, right? He's kind of inquiring to her, what caused that change, tried to get something out of her to say, well, it's something or other, right? So that he could latch onto it. She goes, I don't know. And he goes, okay. All right. So she didn't give him anything to strike her for cause. So he comes back in this next clip and says, yeah, all right, we're going to pass her for cause. And then this is sort of the final. I wanted to show you what happens once a jury member gets approved. And so this judge gives her the final instructions. And since she should really be our last true juror, we're going to have juror number 15, but that juror is not going to be a part of the final panel. They're just going to be sort of a stopgap safeguard in case something goes wrong between now and Monday. So here is Steve again, coming back, telling the judge, all right, couldn't strike her. So this is approved. And then the judge is giving her, not super eventful, but the judge is giving her the final instructions just so we can sort of put a bookend on this jury selection stuff. Here it is, the last clip of the day.
The state passes for cause.
Juror 118, you will serve on our jury. And so we're going to have you come back on Monday at 9 a.m. to start the trial. But watch for any communications from the jury office as far as logistics. And if there's been any change in timing on this. So, any questions for me? Otherwise, the deputy will take you out. You had a letter to get in here. Make sure you keep that.
Okay.
Keep it safe and bring it to next time.
Okay.
Okay?
Sounds good.
Great. Thank you so much.
Thank you.
All right, so that's it. Now we got a full panel. You heard the Judge Cahill. It's kind of echoey today in the court microphones, but it basically said, yep, you're on the jury. So take the letter, go out, talk to the deputy, talk to the bailiff, get the instructions. We'll see you back here on Monday. And that's it. This is what the panel looks like. You can see here we've got a full panel, and let's take a look at some of the demographics. Of course, here we've got 8 white folks and 6 people of color. We can go through and just do a quick count. So we've got 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6 people of color, which means the rest of these are white folks over here. Then we've got 5 males and 9 females. So it is a very female heavy panel. We've got 1, 2, 3. Nope, that was not that. Let's go 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9. So we got 9 women, 5 males. This is our full panel, and this is what the demographics look like. So you can take a quick look. The latest, number 13 and number 14, we've got 2 white females, one in her 40s, one in her 20s. One works in customer service. One is a social worker. One's a dog lover. The other one is a newlywed and works with mental health. And so that should be the full panel. Now, as I said, we're going to get one more added tomorrow for 15. That's our safeguard. And then I'm not real sure what the rest of the agenda looks like this week. If we can get that next person settled tomorrow, the number 15 assigned into the panel temporarily, then we'll probably get some other rulings on some orders and some motions. Tuesday, Wednesday might be very light, may not even have anything to talk about on Thursday or Friday as they're preparing for opening arguments, which should start on Monday, March 29th. So we've got a lot more to talk about on Chauvin's area. So if you have anything that you want to chime in about, feel free to send those questions over at locals.com. Find our Watching the Watchers group. All right, so now let's change gears a little bit. The border crisis is something that is capturing a lot of attention around the country. Many people are either in one of two camps. One, hey, we're doing everything we can. This is not that big of a problem. The other side is, yeah, see, we told you so. There's this huge throng of people who are making their way up onto the southern United States, causing a crisis. And new imagery came out today, a lot of new pictures, some from a Democratic congressperson. We're going to show you, talk about that. We've also got Project Veritas release some new information about some images and photographs that they covered. And so we've got a lot to talk about. So let's start with a little bit of background on this. So, this has been percolating for a long time. Now, immigration has not really been in the forefront of the country's mind for a long period of time, largely because it's been kind of quiet. I mean, this was a big part of Donald Trump's 2016 campaign, where he said that, we got to fix the southern border. He was beating the drum on building a wall. Some of that got done. Some of it didn't get done. And it was kind of something that was a non-issue. I mean, we were talking about a lot of other things. And then coronavirus really captured the fourth year of his presidency. And so now it feels like, to me at least, that this whole thing kind of bubbled up out of nowhere. We saw this big spontaneous surge start right around the same time that Joe Biden took office. And then on Inauguration Day, my understanding is he signed 5 different executive orders, and we started to see some major policy changes trickle down from the new administration, down into Border Patrol, down into the Department of Homeland Security, and now it's turning into a problem. So let's get a little bit of background on this over from the Washington Post. And the Washington Post is not a right-wing, alt-right, crazy conservative Republican organization, which is why I wanted to go to them. I think that traditionally they tend to skew very, very left, in my opinion, and I've sort of been critical of them on this channel, using them as a news source. They do good reporting, but it's not anything that is far right to the point where I think that it is not credible. So let's jump into the background on this story. It says, no end in sight inside the Biden administration's failure to contain the border surge. This was posted 2 days ago on Saturday, March 20th at 1:24 p.m., written by Ashley Parker, Nick Miroff, and Sean Sullivan. It says, shortly before Christmas last year, Susan Rice and Jake Sullivan, 2 top advisors to Biden, sat for an interview with a Spanish wire service to issue a stark warning to migrants considering journeying north to the nation's southern border. Don't come now, but help is on the way. The next day, Biden was similarly pointed, saying his administration, while eager to roll back Donald Trump's immigration policies, first needed to implement guardrails to avoid winding up with 2 million people on our border. So they were eager to roll them back, but they needed to implement these guardrails. So what does that mean? What are guardrails? Because they don't want 2 million people on our southern border. Well, less than a month later, President Biden began tearing down some of the guardrails himself. And let's timeline this, right? Shortly before Christmas last year, Joe Biden was the president-elect. Now, there was a lot of election litigation. We talked a lot about that here, but the election was over. And so they're talking about transition, President-elect Joe Biden. So they're talking about it in Christmas. Then, less than a month later, he began tearing down some of the guardrails himself. He issued 5 immigration executive orders on Inauguration Day. So that's not much time to build up the guardrails. And he promised an immigration policy far more humane and welcoming. Well, we've got a lot of people who want to be welcomed into the country now. His administration also began allowing unaccompanied minors into the country, a marked departure from the Trump administration's approach. So you start to see this, some changes happen, some consequences follow. Now the Biden administration is scrambling to control the biggest surge in 20 years, with the nation on pace for as many as 2 million migrants at the southern border this year. The outcome Biden said he wanted to avoid. Yeah. So, all right. So let's keep going back on this. Situation at the border, which Biden and his advisors steadfastly refused to call a crisis, is the result of an administration that has forewarned of the coming surge, yet still ill-prepared and lacking the capacity to deal with it. Officials have been plagued by muddled messaging, sometimes making appeals that seem directed more at liberal activists than the migrants they need to dissuade from coming to the country. They took several steps, including saying it would allow unaccompanied minors into the country. That increased the flow of migrants and encouraged more to try their luck. There are now more than 10,000 unaccompanied migrant children in the care of the Department of Health and Human Services, and 5,000 more in the care of Customs and Border Patrol, nearly twice the previous record, according to the latest figures obtained by the Washington Post. So double the previous record. We're talking about 15,000 unaccompanied minor children with DHS, another 5,000 with Border Patrol. 15,000 children, twice the previous record. And so what are we going to do about it? Well, the warnings came before Biden even took office. During the transition period, career officials at the Border Patrol tried to issue sober alarms to the Biden team about the likelihood of a crisis at the border that could quickly overwhelm the nation's capacity. So the Border Patrol officials delivered Zoom briefings to the Biden team that included modeling projections showing a steep increase in the arrival of the minors if Trump's policies were suddenly lifted. So plenty of warnings. They knew about it, according to one current and two former Department of Homeland Security officials. So they got the briefing and they didn't heed the warnings. Transition officials understood the risks as well, identifying a surge of unaccompanied minors and a dearth of shelter space exacerbated by the pandemic as the most pressing problems. Yet Biden immediately embarked on an aggressive strategy to roll back Trump administration policies. On his first day, suspended the border wall construction, affirmed protections for young immigrant dreamers, scrapped the travel ban from 7 majority Muslim countries, ordered a 100-day moratorium on deportations by Immigration and Customs Enforcement, and then he sent a broad immigration overhaul proposal to Congress, including an 8-year pathway to citizenship. More moves followed in rapid-fire succession. He ordered a majority increase in refugee admissions. He launched a task force to reunify families separated by Trump's zero-tolerance crackdown. While easing restrictions for minors, he also ended the Remain in Mexico program. And I want to talk about this a little bit. He ended the Remain in Mexico program that Trump had used to send asylum seekers back across the border to wait outside the U.S. territory for their cases to be decided, allowing hundreds of families crowded into squalid camps to enter the United States, producing emotional scenes and circulated widely in Spanish language media. And I have been somebody who's been curious about this problem for some period of time. And I went into a clubhouse room recently where they were talking about immigration. And actually, we've had some immigration attorneys in our clubhouse room. About 2 weeks ago, we had, I think, 2 immigration lawyers come in. And I asked them a pointed question. And they may be in clubhouse right now. Maybe we'll see them after the show. But I wanted to know specifically, what is causing this sudden change? Why are suddenly people now coming to the United States? And I obviously have an opinion on the answer. I think it's because Trump was in office. He had one set of policies. Those policies are no longer there because he is no longer in office. And so people understand that. And I think in terms of incentives, how are we incentivizing or disincentivizing people to do certain things or to not do certain things? That's sort of where I live. I live in criminal law. I live in a space where our society says that really strong disincentives should do something. And oftentimes they really don't, to prohibit, or I would say to reduce recidivism or repeat offenders. But that's aside. That's a whole tangent. I shouldn't have even brought that up. I'm going to go down a whole rabbit hole in a rant, and we don't want to do that today. So we are talking about incentives for what is causing people to come to the southern border. And I was asking people specifically about this. I said, hey, what about this Remain in Mexico policy? What if that was enough to cause an incentive to encourage people to come over into the United States, because rather than waiting in Mexico, they could wait in the United States? It's a pretty simple change. We're not going to deny you asylum. You still have that right to asylum. You still have a right to sort of petition the government for some sort of relief if you are an immigrant, but you just have to wait across the border. You just have to wait in Mexico to do that. And then, of course, the concern there, the criticism is that Trump and his immigration policies also really sort of tightened up the ability for people who were waiting to get access into the country, but it was still waiting in Mexico. You did not get to cross the border and then set up shop in the United States and wait here while your case was pending. And so in my mind, that created a very strong incentive for people to come across the border. And you can have some arguments about that one way or the other, but I'd be curious to see what people have to say about that. What is causing this? Because a lot of the response that I would hear from these other immigration attorneys in Clubhouse and elsewhere is that Biden and his people did not tell them to come. In fact, they've been saying for a long time, don't come to the United States. Kind of, right? But they're kind of talking out of both sides of their mouths. Like, we need to be more humane. That's not who we are. Remember that? A lot of hyperventilators out there saying, hey, That's not who we are. We're Americans. That's just not us. That's not in our spirit. That's not in our heart. That's not who we are. And then now we're starting to see this massive problem of ballooning. So they're doing the same thing that they said that that's not who we are. And now they're having to deal with this massive crisis. They don't have enough physical space to put the bodies from all the people that they are incentivizing to come across the border. So how are we identifying what is causing this change? Let's see if we can break that down a little bit. Department of Homeland Secretary Alejandro Mayorkas acknowledged last week that the Biden administration is on pace to encounter more individuals on the southwest border than we have in the last 20 years. The latest CPB enforcement data shows agents made nearly 100,000 arrests and detentions so far in March. March is not even over yet. On pace to be the highest one-month total since 2006. On March 10th, the busiest day yet, they took more than 6,200 people into custody. So 6,200 people on one day. That's a lot of people. That is a ton of people to take into custody. Wow. All right. So here we have on Thursday, Biden administration and Mexico reached an agreement. The United States would supply Mexico with doses of the vaccine for coronavirus. Mexico then pledged the United States would help contain the migration surge, including taking back more Central Americans' families expelled under the health order. Mexican authorities announced the closure of the country's southern border to non-essential travel. The deal with Mexico is among the first steps the administration has taken aimed at slowing the crossings. Most of its other measures have sought to add capacity for unaccompanied minors and to accelerate the release of certain groups. Homeland Security officials are considering flying migrants to states near the Canadian border for processing, according to two DHS officials and an email reviewed by the Post. Solving the nation's crisis will take time addressing the root cause. Two goals that it right now is to getting the children out of the Border Patrol care and placing them with vetted family members and sponsors in the United States. More than 500 teen and children are arriving each day without parents at nearly 3 times the rate they are being released. 500 teens and children every day. Several administration officials have argued that immigration surges are cyclical. The current one would probably have occurred regardless of who is president. Yeah, right. Yeah, several administrations have argued that. Yeah. This administration has, right? Nobody from Trump's administration is saying that, because we all know why this is happening. Now, what is the White House saying about this? In her White House press briefing on Thursday last week, answering a question on immigration, Psaki seemed to slip up, referring to, quote, the crisis on the border. Pressed later on her word choice, Psaki corrected herself, saying, quote, challenges on the border, and replied that her earlier misstatement did not reflect any change in the administration's thinking about the border surge. Misstep underscores the administration's struggle to send a coherent message on the border, despite repeatedly saying that now is not the time for asylum seekers to come. They're still losing the messaging war. Smugglers, as well as relatives of the migrants already in the United States, often argue that Biden and his more lenient policies mean making the journey is now worth the risk. And so that's obviously how this works, right? It's about the incentives. A lot of people that I've been speaking to, they just say, well, Joe Biden said, don't come, He said they shouldn't cross those borders. Don't come. And it's like, guys, okay, that's great. Do you think that everybody who wanted to come to the United States listened to Gospel Joe and just said, all right, good call. You're right, Joe. Going to wait until you give me the okay there, Uncle Joe. Thank you for that. No, that's not how this works. The policies are what works. So people are going to continue to come until the incentives are removed and eliminated. Now, you can have a disagreement about that, whether you think that's the right thing to do, whether you think that's humanitarian to remove some of the barriers to entry. You can say that that's a humanitarian thing to do. And you can say that anybody out there who wants to have, let's say, legal, safe, controlled immigration, if you can call them bigots and xenophobes all you want, that's also fine. It doesn't bother me at all if you want to call me that. But I think that having a policy that allows us to reach our goals is important. And this policy is not doing that at all. Right now we have, let's say this. Nobody wants kids in cages. Nobody wants people to be rushing the border and not be housed and not receive the basic humanitarian ends, goals, and needs. Nobody wants people sleeping on floors, covered up in space blankets. That's not okay, right? We don't want that. But we also don't want an uncontrolled, unmanageable rush of approximately 2 million people on the southern border. 6,200 in one day. 100,000 in 1 month. That's 2 million people very quickly. And you can have a lot of policy disagreements on that. You can say you're a libertarian, and hey, it's the free flow of labor. If people want to come across the borders, open borders, this is just capitalism in action. If there was no economic need for these people here, then they wouldn't come. You can have that argument. Or you can have the moral superiority argument. These are children. How could you do this to children? All right, you can take that argument too. But the point is, we got to be talking about this, I think, candidly. We need to have real conversations about it. Right now, it sounds like the Biden administration is just not wanting to acknowledge it. And when they do acknowledge it, they say, well, this is cyclical, or they blame Donald Trump, as we're about to see. Well, it's the prior administration that was really responsible for this stuff. But new photos are out now, and so now everybody is up in arms about it, and rightfully so, because it's a massive double standard. I was not somebody here who was hyperventilating over the kids in cages BS when Donald Trump was doing it. I'm not going to do it here either. I'm not going to sit here and go, this is outrageous. I don't think that people coming across the border should be set up in the Four Seasons. There should be some disincentives for this stuff. When they come across the border, if the government is going to set up the incentives to encourage them to cross that border and to be here, well, then they got to deal with that, right? The Biden administration, if they're saying that we're going to modify these policies and that causes a bunch of people to come across the borders, well, then they got to deal with it. That's their responsibility because they've opened themselves up to that burden. They've said, we're gonna make these adjustments. It's being communicated across the world. People are hearing it. They're making a rush to the border. Now the Biden administration, they have no idea what to do with it, which is what we're going to see with these photos. Kids in cages. This came over from hotair.com. Ed Morrissey did some of the heavy lifting on this. It's a good blog if you want to check it out. Photos leak of Biden's border crisis holding pods. So these aren't cages anymore. These are pods for children. Want to see what the Biden administration has kept hidden from the public in the border crisis? Give House Democrat Henry Cuellar some thanks for this leak over to Axios, which published pictures of the pods in which children were being warehoused. These look suspiciously like kids in cages photos used to slam Trump administration right up to their 2014 provenance became widely known. It looks like the only change between Biden and Obama is replacing chain link for plastic, stuffing more kids than ever into these cages. And this came over from Steph Knight over at Axios.com. It says here, exclusive photos from inside a Border Patrol temporary overflow facility taken over the weekend in Donna, Texas, reveal a crowded makeshift conditions at the border as the government's longer-term child shelters and family detention centers fill up. This is the scoop over from Axios. Next up, we've got the pictures. It says exclusive photos from inside the area where there's a temporary overflow facility in Donna, Texas. Crowded makeshift conditions. Each of the 8 pods in the so-called soft-sided facility has a 260-person occupancy, said Representative Henry Cuellar from Texas. He's a Democrat, by the way. He provided photos to Axios to raise awareness about the situation, but on Sunday, he said one pod held more than 400 unaccompanied male minors. 400 kids. Because the Biden administration has restricted media coverage at the housing facilities, why would they do that? If they're a very transparent and accountable administration, well, then why the hell are they restricting the media from going and taking these pictures? Images like these offer a rare window into the conditions. Cuellar, who recently visited a shelter for children, did not tour the Donna facility or take the photos himself. He says they were taken over the weekend. Cuellar described the setting as, quote, terrible conditions for the children, said they need to be moved more rapidly into the care of the Department of Health and Human Services. This is what it looks like. Right? See a lot of people. Now, some of them have masks on, all lying around. Of course, this is not a cage because this is plastic. If this were some other material other than plastic, then that would be a cage. And Joe Biden and his administration would really be like the Third Reich. I mean, if you want to get down to it, but they're not. This is not Third Reich behavior. This is just very humanitarian. As you can see here, some people have their little space blankets, which is very nice. And they are now behind plastic, which is much more humane. I mean, I feel better about this. I'm not even upset about it, really. Here's another one where there's some more kids not in cages. This is just a facility. This is a pod, as we can see. Number of doors, Border Patrol agent over here. We've got a lot of people with masks on, a lot of children. Most of their images are, of course, all blanked out and protected. But certainly not a cage. Very humanitarian. It looks like we have like a guard tower up here, which sort of like something that you might see in like a jail or a prison or something like that, they have these towers where officers are sort of high up on there. But this is not even remotely close to kids in cages because this is plastic, and everything is also white in here. You see how nice and sort of painted white this is, which is a very cheery color, kind of looks clean and open. And so that's nice. It looks refreshing. So there you go. So there's some more images. Here's another one. A lot of other kids sort of in not non-cages. I kind of want to call these plastic cages, but they're just not. Let's call them plastic rooms. Plastic pods, I guess, is the word they're using. We can go with that word. So it looks like they're watching some TV there on a nice, 27-inch TV for 400 people. So that's good. We got some saran wrapped mattresses, just a couple of them. Not everybody has one, looks like. And everybody's just wrapped up in space blankets. So there's some more images coming out. Now, this is from Joe Biden's people here. This is from his administration. So this is okay. This is okay. This is not that big of a deal. Here is another one. As you can see, some people just sort of laying around there. Somebody had some animal crackers, looks like, down there. And definitely not cages, more plastic. So it's just like, some saran wrap. I mean, that's really all this is. Not even a big deal. So those are the new images that are floating around the internet. Those came out from a Texas Democratic representative. And if you recall, I'm not going to go back into the timeline, into the time capsule here, but do you remember those images of AOC standing outside, hanging on the chain link fence, crying because of what she saw on the inside, or just, taking pictures for her Instagram? It was one of the two. I can't tell which one it was. But the question is, what are these people saying about this? A lot of news about kids in cages during the early administration, Trump administration. Now, kind of looks exactly the same. It's actually significantly worse because it's the highest that it's been in the last 20 years. Double the last record. So it's significantly worse. But I'm not hearing as much hyperventilating today. Just a little bit. Just some of these stories. Here it is from Andrew Meehan. It says, important to note that the Donna facility is in many ways the best facility along the southern border. The overcrowding seen here is a result of a lack of capacity to move children to more appropriate, longer-term settings. So this is the best image. It's the best facility that we got. The other ones are way worse. And since Joe Biden and his media people are not allowing any other reporters or journalists into any of these facilities, we can't really see what's going on in there. Transparent and accountable, though. Here is James O'Keefe, as usual, going out there and releasing never-before-seen images from Donna, Texas. It's an immigrant detention center. It says thousands of illegal immigrants packed into tight spaces and wrapped in a space blanket on the floor. Insider says 50+ are COVID positive. Hashtag Biden border crisis, which was trending today. So we've got that video. And this is another very interesting point. A lot of people typically, I would say on the left side of the aisle, they are very, very hysterical about COVID. They've been for a long time. We see this massive lockdowns in all of the left-leaning states in this country. And I wonder if they're as concerned about COVID for the undocumented immigrants. Well, what are we going to do with, we've got no space. We've got a ton of COVID. We've got no capacity to process these people through their justice requests. At least they got enough space blankets, though. That's good. Here is James O'Keefe.
Project Veritas has obtained never-before-seen photographs of what it actually looks like inside this facility. Shocking images showing people wrapped up in what looks like metal foil, laying on the ground, their faces covered. Why won't the administration be honest about this? Why won't they show you these images? I'm on the ground in Donna, Texas. If you want to take a look at this facility right here, just a month ago, Customs and Border Patrol agents completed the construction of that facility. It's a 165,000 square foot facility, and we have never seen images inside this facility before. They won't even allow the non-profit lawyers who conduct the actual oversight of these immigration detention centers to go inside. We have a man who's telling us to leave. Where would the press?
Oh man, you gotta get off. It's private property.
They told us it's private property, but you know what isn't private property? Airspace. We're gonna fly this Cirrus right over the top of the detention center to get a better look. There's the facility right there. You can see it. There it is. Flying over the facility to give you a good vantage point. During a recent press conference, the press secretary was asked a question why they haven't released these images.
Even you all haven't released any images that you obviously could redact if you wanted to. again, we remain committed to sharing with all of you the treatment.
She dodged the question, saying, quote,
And we remain committed to transparency. I don't have an update for you on the
timeline, end quote. Well, Press Secretary of the White House, let Project Veritas do your job for you. Just last night, we have now obtained these photos inside this facility. Now, these photos are very, very grim. Project Veritas has also learned these photographs were taken in the last few days. There are 8 pods with 8 cells in each facility. At any given moment, there are an average of 3,000 people in custody inside this detention center. The pod has 8 cells that are currently holding 600, that's 600 unaccompanied juvenile males aged 7 to 17. They're separated by age or physical size depending on the room. 50 of the individuals inside this facility were COVID positive. There have been multiple sexual assaults, normal assaults, and daily medical emergencies.
Yeah, these things are so frustrating from a policy perspective. You know, on it's stuff like this is so obvious, in my opinion. There are a lot of different types of policy issues that we deal with in the world where it's just not that clear as to what we should do about it. Like with coronavirus, for example, you know, this thing popped up. Nobody knew what to do. Everybody was scrambling to try to find answers. And it was a natural, organic thing that just popped up and nobody knew what to do about it. We were all trying our very best. But this is something that we can control. I mean, literally, you can have one president go from one president to another president, change a couple policies. Suddenly, there's a crisis that was manufactured as a result of the policy changes. And so the real question is why? Why does this stuff happen? And why are we not talking about the cause of what happened? We're talking about this, you know, sort of after the fact. Well, what are we going to do with these kids? What are we going to do with the conditions are terrible. But maybe it's the policy. Maybe we should change the policy because this wasn't happening 3 months ago. 4 months ago now. So, all right. Here is the Department of Homeland Security. This guy, he goes by the name of Mayorkas. He tells Chuck Todd, quote, "The border is closed." Yeah, right. It's too late for that. Says, "We are expelling families. We are expelling single adults. And we have made a decision that we will not expel young, vulnerable children." So it sounds like then that they are they separating kids from their parents or what? Are the kids just coming over on their own? Let's listen in on him. He goes on Meet the Press and he gives a bunch of non-answers. He's got 2 minutes here to give an answer. You're going to hear whoever this interviewer is. I think it's Chuck Todd, something like that. He goes out there and he says, well, okay, respectfully, how about you answer this question? We go back over to the Department of Homeland Security guy and he says, well, we've got 3 solutions. In fact, oh, you want a solution? I got 3 of them. Long term, middle term, short term. Then he doesn't explain any of those things. Doesn't tell us what any of that stuff is. So he gives us no answer. Here he is.
Are you concerned that a market efficiency has been created where folks have decided, look, my kid's got a shot at getting in the United States if I don't go with them?
Incentives.
Chuck, our message has been straightforward and simple, and it's true. The border is closed. We are expelling families. We are expelling single adults, and we've made a decision that we will not expel young, vulnerable children. I think we are executing on our plans, and quite frankly, when we are finished doing so, the American public will look back on this and say we secured our border and we upheld our values and our principles as a nation.
How can you say the border is closed if there is this, what some would look at as a loophole? And I understand on humanitarian grounds, but if the goal is to get these asylum seekers to seek the asylum in home country, Honduras, Guatemala, El Salvador, for instance, how do you get them to do that if our policy is to let them in at the border?
Good question. Good question.
So, Chuck, we have a short-term plan, a medium-term plan, and a long-term plan, and the president and I have spoken to this repeatedly. Please remember something, that President Trump dismantled the orderly, humane, and efficient way of allowing children to make their claims under United States law in their home countries. He dismantled the Central American Minors Program. So we are rebuilding those orderly and safe processes as quickly as possible. But in the meantime, we will not expel into the Mexican desert, for example,
Here it comes.
3 orphan children whom I saw over the last 2 weeks. We just won't do that.
Why?
That's not who we are.
There it is. That's not who we are. What a joke of an interview that was. Absolutely non-answers across the board. The interviewer says, can you just answer? It sounds like you said the border's closed, but your policies are really encouraging people because they know that they have this loophole. They have an exit strategy. As long as they can get to your shore, then they're good. They're in the clear because your own policy idiots say that they are allowed into the country and they're not going to adjust that. He asks him, what's your plan? He goes, we got a long-term plan, a medium-term plan, and a short-term plan. Then goes on to not answer about or explain about anything about any one of those plans, just defaults right back to Donald Trump and says he wrecked the immigration system. It's his fault that we can't process these people because he unrolled all of these plans. Well, that might be true. He may have done that. I won't even argue with that. Let's say he did roll those plans back. Well, you knew that as the Biden administration before you came in and eliminated the guardrails that Joe Biden himself had said that he did not want to avoid pulling off of the train tracks because this whole thing is going to go off the rails quickly. He said, Joe Biden said, we don't want 2 million people showing up at the southern border. Now, according to estimates, there's 2 million people showing up at the southern border. We got Department of Homeland Security, non-answer person, just a typical politician who comes out there and just recites rote talking points like an automaton robot. Answers nothing for us. We got no insight from that other than he wants to blame Trump's administration for this thing when there weren't 2 million people surging the southern border during the Trump administration. So none of that stuff was necessary because there wasn't a surge because of his policies. So when they get asked about their policies, he says we've got 3 plans, but then doesn't detail any of the plans and just says, well, it's all Trump's fault. So here is, and I've heard this too. I've heard a lot of criticism here saying that it is not Biden's fault. It's not his administration's fault. These are just people who just decided that we're going to come. It's March now. It's kind of nice out here in Arizona. In July, it's going to be 140 million degrees here. So nobody likes that. So they're all coming across right now. That's it. It's just a spontaneous thing. It's a bunch of people who just decided to migrate today. After 4 years, well, now's a good time. Yeah, March 2021, coronavirus is sort of on the way out. Maybe we'll just get the kids together, get your mom, honey, get your wife, get your wife, sweetie, get everybody, come up, bring them all in here. And we're going to go make a trek across the border. Or some pretty strong incentives were created by the new administration. Could it be that? Let's ask. Here is a Twitter post over from Steve Guest says, ABC's Martha Raddatz to illegal alien who crossed the border. And you can use that term if you want. You can call it pejorative. I don't particularly care. Would you have tried to do this when Donald Trump was president? Martha Raddatz asks. Illegal alien says, definitely not. Did you come here because Joe Biden was elected president? He says, basically. All right, so there you go. And don't take my word for it. Here is the video of this. And this is so obvious. It's not even funny. It is actually pretty funny, but it's kind of ridiculous that this is so shocking to people. Obviously, this is the answer. Here is a clip from that interview.
This significant surge coming after President Biden ended Donald Trump's so-called Remain in Mexico policy, requiring asylum seekers to wait there for their court proceedings. Since then, many of those tent cities along the Mexican border have emptied out as people start streaming in. We were there when a bus of 56 asylum seekers arrived at Casa Alitas, a Catholic charity shelter in Tucson. Men, pregnant women, and children stepping off the bus with only what they could carry. This father, who asked that we not show his face, traveled to Mexico from Brazil with his wife and 3 young kids before crossing the border. Would you have tried to do this when Donald Trump was president?
Definitely not. Definitely. We had the chance, the same violence that is going on today was there last year. We used to watch the news, and I definitely won't do this.
So did you come here because Joe Biden was elected president?
Basically. The main thing was the violence in my country. And the second thing, I think, was Joe Biden.
Yeah, so he goes through, he says, the main thing in my country was the violence. The second thing is Joe Biden, right? He says, I don't know if you could hear that. Of course, they didn't show his face, but he said specifically, would you have come here if Donald Trump was still president? And he goes, no, absolutely not. No way. Not even close. He said, there was still violence in my country a year ago, but we watched the news and we didn't come. Now that Joe Biden is president, now we have a chance. This guy came all the way up from Brazil and he's making a move. Look, when I am sort of critical about immigration, it has nothing to do with the fact that I don't want good people here in this country. I want people who are hurting, who want to be a part of the American dream, to come and be a part of this country. I want that. I want a good country here, and that is a country of immigrants, and I think it's a beautiful thing, but it needs to be done legally, and we need to do it in a way where our government is not acting in a boneheaded manner that is causing a lot of unnecessary suffering. These people are suffering because our incompetent government created very perverse incentives. They were basically coming out with a bunch of policies that was going to appease all of the woke people that exist in this country, all of the people who just look at themselves every morning in the mirror and say, that's not who we are in this country. They wake up every day. Department of Homeland Security, Mayorkas, goes in front of his mirror and he just practices that. We're Americans. That's not who we are. All right. Good for you, man. Good for you. Go out there, pass a bunch of policies that make you feel better about yourself, that give you this claim to massive moral superiority about what a good person you are in this country, and make everybody feel good because you rolled back the evil Trump administration's policies, even though that they were working, even though we didn't see a surge of 2 million people banging up against the southern border of the United States. You can feel better about that. But you got to deal with the consequences, and you are responsible. You broke the jar. You got to fix it. If you go into the shop and you break something, you own it. You got to pay for that. And that's exactly what Joe Biden did. Now there's a huge just surge of individuals, people, children, women, men, everybody in between coming across the border. They're all suffering unnecessarily. Whose fault is that? It's Joe Biden's fault, and it's his administration's fault, because everything was, you might have disagreed with it on a humanitarian level, and you could say that the immigration system in this country is massively broken. I wouldn't even fight you on that. But it's about this. It's about what is taking place at the southern border and who caused it. What are the policies that led to these consequences? They all came from Joe Biden. And it's not even hard to pin it on him. Here is a prime example, and I can guarantee you that person is not alone. So the rest of that Raditz show, here it is. We have somebody else. Now a lot of people on the left are saying, well, this is pretty tone deaf. This is posted over from RNC Research, says ABC on Biden's border crisis. To do that 180 without really any preparation, he owns this. He's tone deaf and doesn't have a plan. You're not kidding me. This is from ABC.
Gangsterism, corruption. The pressure is tremendous, and to do that 180 without really any preparation, he owns this now. He owns it.
Yeah. And Laura, he really does. And should they have been more aware? I mean, they really seem tone deaf to the politics of this as well. You heard Mayorkas trying to do cleanup, I think, there, trying to send this strong message. But is it too late?
Well, that's why you see, Martha, so many of the administration officials, including Mayorkas, as well as Roberta Jacobson, the Southern Border Coordinator for the White House, they're starting to change their tune. They're starting to say, we're not just saying don't come, we're saying don't come like this ever and come in the legal fashion. But again, there's such a big influx. And I was just talking to local advocates here in El Paso yesterday, and they were saying that they feel as though beyond the rollback of the Remain in Mexico, which they felt as though went well, according to the advocates and activists. Beyond that, they feel as though the White House doesn't have a plan in terms of how to address not just the children, but also the adults and the families that are coming over here. And that when migrants are being released into South Texas or when they're being transferred here to El Paso, that there isn't enough testing, COVID testing for them, that they aren't sure where they're supposed to go. And so they really, as Matt said, they do feel like it's a not sustainable situation here.
Yeah, so nobody is happy about this. You have people who are concerned about unbridled immigration into this country. They're unhappy about it because there's a surge at the border. But you also have people who want a lot more people coming into this country, and they would welcome all of these people with open arms. They're saying this is also problematic. So this is coming from the left. This is people who said that Joe Biden was going to come in here and just really give us a sort of hopeful immigration policy that would reverse a lot of the draconian megalomaniac Donald Trump. They were going to reverse all of that. And now they're not doing such a good job. Now there's people suffering. Worse than when Donald Trump was in office. Literally, it's twice the amount of people. They have no idea what to do. Let's wrap this up. It says here, DHS Secretary Alejandro Mayorkas acknowledged last week that the Biden administration is on pace to encounter more individuals than we have in the last 20 years. 100,000 arrests. I already talked about those numbers. 6,200 in custody. Border Patrol chief wrote on Twitter last week, says no end in sight. Friday, Senator Chris Murphy from Connecticut joined Mayorkas and 3 other lawmakers, including Republicans, on a trip to the border. Leaving a processing facility in El Paso, Murphy tweeted that he was shaken by what he saw. Hundreds of kids packed into big open rooms, he wrote. In a corner, I fought back tears as a 13-year-old girl sobbed uncontrollably, explaining through a translator how terrified she was, having been separated from her grandmother and without her parents. Right? So this is what Joe Biden gets. This is what his administration gets. It's obvious to me. When you create a bunch of incentives to encourage people to do something, they're going to do those things. They're doing it. And so he wrecked it. Now he's got to fix it. He owns the whole thing. Very sad. Very sad. I'm not encouraging. I don't endorse treating people poorly ever. Very sad. Of our own making, which is why this is so stupid. Why it's so embarrassing that this is going on in this country. It's obvious. But they're responding not to reality. They're responding to what feels good. They're going to roll all this stuff back. Well, it's going to cause a problem. You guys are going to have to deal with it so they can clean it up. All right, so let's take some questions over here from locals.com. My slide is not updating. I apologize. I missed some questions in that first segment because my slides were not updating. And so I'm going to see if I can get this open now and get some of the questions. And for some reason, it's just not working. So we're not doing questions today, apparently, because my slides aren't working. So we're just going to save those questions for tomorrow. Ask your questions if you want to. And let's move on to the next segment. Go to watchingthewatchers.locals.com to ask a question tomorrow. All right, so let's get into the final segment of the day. Every year, the Supreme Court tells us what cases they're going to hear. And sometimes we get some interesting cases. Sometimes we get some very boring cases. But today, we have new orders from the Supreme Court. It says here on Monday, March 22nd, a whole new slew of cases have been addressed. And today, we're going to talk about one of them. In particular, it's the United States versus Tsarnaev, who is the Boston Marathon Bomber. The Supreme Court is going to be taking his case. And we're going to be talking about the death penalty, whether or not he can be executed, whether or not he needs a new trial. A lot of interesting issues. So we're going to flesh out a little bit about this individual and about where this case is. What is going on with this? The death penalty in this country is now up for a little bit of contestation. Remember, as Donald Trump and his administration was departing from the country's eye, we were seeing a lot of executions happen at the last minute. Donald Trump, and I disagree completely on this topic, was very, very pro death penalty. And we covered a lot of those cases here. And now Joe Biden allegedly is opposed to the death penalty, even though he passed a bunch of crime bills and threw a bunch of people in prison, more people than I think anybody could even put a figure on. I think he's more responsible for people in custody than anybody in this country. But apparently, he's okay if they get life in penalty, but just doesn't want them to die. And this has something to do, I think, with his supposed Catholicism or whatever, religion he ascribes to, whatever. So let's talk about this case, the Boston Marathon Bomber. Here is the list of cases that were discussed today coming out of the Supreme Court. Monday, March 22nd, 2021. Orders in pending cases. So most of these we don't really care about for the purposes of this channel, but we'll notice that these were orders in pending cases. Then down here, we have certiorari, which was granted on 2 of them. This one, don't really care much about Rolls-Royce. Here is an important one. This is U.S. versus Tsarnaev, who is the Boston bomber. The petition for a writ of certiorari is granted, and it was denied in a bunch of other cases. So look down here, Facebook, for example, they're not going to get their case heard by the Supreme Court, but the Boston Marathon Bomber is. And all of this is going to be interesting forthcoming because this might be a realignment as it relates to some of the death penalty cases. We're going to see what the Supreme Court has to say about it. Let's do a quick recap on the Boston Marathon bombing. This happened some time ago in 2013, and so a little bit of a refresher is in order. During the annual Boston Marathon back in 2013, 2 homemade pressure cooker bombs detonated 14 seconds and 210 yards apart at 2:49 p.m. near the finish line of the race. 3 people were killed, hundreds of others were injured, 17 people lost their limbs. Very gruesome. I remember this in 2013. I was just coming out of law school, just coming out of it, and I remember this happening. I actually would have been a licensed attorney at this point in time for 3 months. So I was younger. Don't remember a lot about it, actually. I remember seeing some of the news, some of the headlines, and then when I was reading through this, it brought it all back. The FBI released 2 images of 2 suspects. They were later identified as these Chechen brothers. We got the Tsarnaev brothers is how I'm going to say it. Following their identification, they killed an MIT policeman, kidnapped a man in his car, had a shootout with the police in nearby Watertown, during which 2 officers were severely injured, one who died a year later. Tamirian was shot several times, and his brother, Dokimov, ran him over while escaping in a stolen car. So the brother died. The older brother died. And I remember this because I remember this guy was, I think, hiding in a boat somewhere nearby. An unprecedented manhunt for the younger brother ensued on April 19th. Thousands of law enforcement officers searched a 20-area block of Watertown. Residents of Watertown and surrounding communities were asked to stay indoors, and the transportation system in most businesses and public places closed. 6 p.m., Watertown resident discovered him hiding in a boat in his backyard. He was shot and wounded by the police before being taken into custody. During questioning, he said that his brother and him were motivated by the wars in Iraq and Afghanistan. They were self-radicalized, unconnected to any groups. He was following his brother's lead. They learned how to make explosive devices following an online magazine of Al-Qaeda. He also said they wanted to go to New York City to bomb Times Square. He was convicted in April of 2015 of 30 charges, including using a weapon of mass destruction and malicious destruction of property resulting in death. 2 months later, he was sentenced to death. So this is what we're going to talk about. 2 months later, 2015, he was sentenced to death, though in July 2020, this sentence was vacated, and it's to be reheard by a new trial. What? He gets a new trial? This guy killed 3 people, dismembered, delimbed 17 other people, hundreds other injured. Why does he get a new trial? Let's break it down. Here we have this being posted over at the SCOTUS blog. Nearly 8 years after the 2 homemade bombs were detonated near the finish line, Supreme Court announced on Monday, today, that it would review the case of Tsarnaev, who was sentenced to death in 2013. Why was this changed? The U.S. Court of Appeals for the First Circuit threw out his death sentences last year, ruling that the district court should have asked potential jurors what media coverage they had seen about the case, and the district court should not have excluded from the sentencing phase evidence that his brother, the one who placed one of the bombs, was involved in a separate triple murder. Supreme Court's decision to hear the case came on a list of orders from the justices from the private conference. So 2 things happened back then. He was convicted. He appealed it, went up to the First Circuit. First Circuit. Now I'm going to show you this First Circuit case here in the next slide, but let me just give you a sort of an issue spotting overview. Number 1, they said that the jurors should have been asked about the media. So think about this in the context of the Chauvin trial, Chauvin, George Floyd. Right now, every single juror that we're seeing being called up in front of voir dire, in front of the other individuals, in front of the defense lawyer and the prosecuting attorney, in front of the judge, they're all asked, how much of this have you seen? Did you see that video? Did you hear about the settlement? Did you know about any of this stuff? And if so, can you still be a fair and impartial juror? And as we saw, many of them not. I think we just got our 14th juror today, and we went through 118 people to get 14. It's a lot. A lot of people heard about this. Apparently, in this Boston Marathon bombing case, they didn't ask about it. Now, I don't remember. I wasn't paying attention to that case in 2013, but apparently the First Circuit said not good enough. They should have been asking about, what did you hear about this case in the media? The Department of Justice, and so let's sort of break this up a little bit. Remember how this works. You've got a district court, which is the low-level court. You have a court of appeals. Then you have the Supreme Court at the very top. And so Tsarnaev's case went from the district court up to the court of appeals. They sent that back down as it relates to a couple charges. They said, nope, during sentencing, which is when he gets the penalty, during the sentencing phase, they said, nope, you got to go back and they need to hear about your older brother and the fact that he was involved in a triple murder. Okay, that might have been mitigation. That might have been something that would have convinced the jurors that maybe the younger brother didn't deserve the death penalty. So kind of two different things. One is about sentencing. One is about whether the jurors were properly advised and sort of segregated from some of the media story. Now, when the Tsarnaev brother, when he won, so he goes from the district court to the court of appeals. He loses at trial. Yep, you get convicted of 30 counts. We're going to give you the death penalty. He takes that up to the court of appeals. Court of appeals says, no, we're going to reverse some of those convictions and we're not going to give you the death penalty. What happens there? Who's in charge? Well, Donald Trump was running the Department of Justice. And so what did they do? They said, no, we don't like that First Circuit Court of Appeals ruling. What are you, nuts? You mean we can't execute this guy? That's insane. So they said, we're going to appeal this up to the Supreme Court. And they did. And the Supreme Court today, from their filings last year, said, okay, we're going to hear this case. Well, guess what? Donald Trump's not in office anymore. Now it's Joe Biden. Donald Trump was pro-death penalty. Joe Biden is apparently, allegedly, anti-death penalty. And so now it's his Department of Justice. So the question then is, what is the Department of Justice under the Biden administration going to do? Are they going to continue with this case? Are they going to continue to pursue the death penalty? Or are they going to be more in conformity with some of Joe Biden's campaign rhetoric where he was saying that, no, they're going to roll back federal executions? So where is Joe Biden going to fall in this case? Is Joe Biden going to support the execution of the Boston Marathon Bomber? Or is Joe Biden going to oppose the execution of the Boston Marathon Bomber? These are the pertinent questions here. The one pertinent question. The Department of Justice went through the Supreme Court last October asking the justices to review the First Circuit's ruling. Although the briefing in the case was complete by late December, with the DOJ having expressly tried to ensure the case could be briefed and argued during the 2020-2021 term, the justices considered the case at 7 consecutive conferences before finally granting the DOJ's petition on Monday. During that time, the Trump administration was succeeded by the administration of President Joe Biden, who is reportedly considering an end to the federal death penalty. So you've got Trump's DOJ, who wanted to go and execute the Boston bomber. Then you've got the case is now sort of is percolating around in the justice system. Joe Biden takes over, and he has said that we're going to revoke the federal death penalty. Where's this all going to end up? Let's take a look at the First Circuit Court of Appeals case. This was decided back on July 31st, 2020, United States of America versus Dzhokhar Tsarnaev. This is an overview. We're not going to read the whole case, obviously. Let's just go through a little bit here. It says, together with his older brother, they detonated 2 homemade bombs in 2013. Radical jihadis bent on killing Americans. They caused battlefield-like carnage. 3 people died. Hundreds more suffered horrific, life-altering injuries. Desperately trying to flee the state, the brothers also gunned down a local campus police officer in cold blood. I remember that. Reports and images of their brutality flashed across the TV and elsewhere. One could not turn on the radio without hearing something about these sad events. They eventually got caught. Older brother died after a confrontation with the police. Indicted on various charges, younger brother stood trial 2 years later in a courthouse just miles from where the bombs went off. Through his lawyers, he conceded that he did everything the government alleged. He insisted that his brother was the radicalizing catalyst, essentially intimidating him into acting as he had. There's a different statute here that provides relative culpability as a mitigating factor relevant to the imposition of the death penalty. So what this First Circuit Court of Appeals is saying is if you look at 18 U.S. Code 3592A4, it's saying that what you can do is if you've got multiple people, let's say co-defendants or several bad actors, if you can sort of assign blame more to one person than another person, then you can consider that as mitigation in a death penalty case. So you can use that to say, this is why I don't deserve the death penalty. Number one, I mean, I didn't really do it. You know, I was involved in it. I helped build the bomb and do this, but my brother was goading me into doing it. He was the one ultimately responsible for it. He bought the materials. He dragged me down there that day and so on and so forth. That's why I don't deserve the death penalty. That's what the defense is arguing here. And the court is convinced. Apparently, a jury convicted him of all charges and recommended a death sentence on several of the death-eligible counts, a sentence that the district court judge imposed. So at trial, defense presented all this evidence. Jury said, whatever, you're guilty, and you're going to die for it. A core promise of our criminal justice system is that even the very worst among us deserves to be fairly tried and lawfully punished, a point forcefully made by the U.S. Attorney of Massachusetts during a presser at trial's end. To help make that promise a reality, decisions long on our book say that a judge handling a case involved prejudicial pretrial publicity must elicit the kind and degree of each prospective juror's exposure to the case or the parties, if asked by counsel. There's a case that they cite from the First Circuit from 1968 says, only then can the judge reliably assess whether a potential juror can ignore that publicity as the law requires. But despite a diligent effort, the judge here did not meet the standard set by that prior case and its successors. So a judge is supposed to elicit the kind and the degree of the exposure from each juror of their exposure to the case or the parties. Then they can assess whether that juror can be fair and impartial. We're seeing this in the Chauvin trial. We've seen it from multiple sides. The Judge Cahill has asked every juror about it. The defense has asked questions. Prosecution has asked questions. I don't know why that didn't happen in the underlying case, but the First Circuit said that didn't happen. Another error forces us to act as well. This one involving a judge's denial of his post-trial motions of judgment for acquittal. Navigating the complex and changing area of the law, the judge let 3 convictions stand. The judge thought that each of the underlying offenses constituted a crime of violence, but with respect and with the luxury of time that district judges really have, we believe the current state of the law propels us towards the opposite conclusion. So they're discussing whether they can categorize certain crimes as crimes of violence. The first error requires us to vacate the death sentences. The second compels us to reverse 3 convictions. On remand, the district court must then enter judgments of acquittal on the relevant charges, impanel a new jury, and preside over a new trial strictly limited to what penalty he should get on the death-eligible counts. All right, so just to be clear, we are affirming the convictions, excluding those 3 that are not crimes of violence, and many life sentences imposed on those remaining counts. He's going to remain confined to prison for the rest of his life, with the only question remaining being whether the government will end his life by executing him. What follows is an explanation of our reasoning as well as our certain issues that may occur on remand. So, a new trial on the 3 charges, new question about whether the death penalty can be ultimately imposed with that new information, with the new argument from the defense that it wasn't him, it was his brother. Can they discuss that at the next trial? And he's not going to get out of custody. He's going to be in custody for the rest of his life. Many, many life sentences. He's not going anywhere. The only question is the government going to execute him, or is he going to die through natural causes at the expiration of his life in however long that takes? It's a good question. First Circuit said that's going back down. You're going to do all that stuff over again. Trump administration said, the hell we are. We're going up to the Supreme Court, buddy boy. We're going to see what the Supreme Court says. Supreme Court, going to hear the case now. Supreme Court to consider the death sentence. They agreed on Monday to consider arguments over the death penalty. Prosecutors had appealed the lower court ruling, and that was done under Trump. He was convicted of joining his older brother in 2013. Court of Appeals ordered a new sentencing hearing, saying that unanimously that the judge didn't ask enough questions of the jurors about news media reports about the bombings. And they want also, questions about sentencing. Make no mistake, he's not getting out of custody. The Justice Department lawyers urged the Supreme Court to reverse the ruling and let the death sentence stand, calling the case one of the most important terrorism prosecutions in our nation's history. Yeah, that sounds right? That sounds right. Past Supreme Court rulings don't require asking any prospective jurors about the specific content of the news reports they've seen or heard, the government said. Instead, the test is whether the jurors can set aside their impressions or opinions and base their verdicts on the evidence presented. Yeah, so okay, that's interesting. In its ruling, the appeals court said that the judge improperly blocked evidence about a 2011 Boston area murder in which 3 men were bound, beaten, and killed. The FBI interviewed a man who said he was there when his older brother carried out the murders. Trial judge ruled that the testimony was unproven and that the killings were too far removed from the bombings, but the appeals court said the defense was deprived of evidence that showed the older brother was violent and domineering. So we got a little bit more meat there. 2011, older brother is involved apparently in a triple homicide. And younger brother wanted to bring that evidence into court to say, look, I'm not the violent person. It's my brother. He's the one who did this. And he may have been violent with me, right? It's a lot of mitigation. It's a lot of saying, yes, I was involved in this thing, but I am not the mastermind of this thing. Somebody else was responsible for it. Therefore, he knows he's not getting out of custody. The only question that remains is whether he is going to be executed for it. In response, the government said any minimal value the evidence may have had was outweighed by the danger of confusing the jury. And we talked about this a lot in the Chauvin case. This is the probative versus the prejudicial scale. You have information that is very probative. It's going to answer questions for you. It's going to give you some insight into how something works or help you address a fact or solve an issue. But it's also prejudicial, meaning if you hear it, if anybody hears that, whoa, that's going to make you think about this case a little bit differently. That's going to make you go, dang, are you kidding me? All right, that changes my entire perception of the case. That's called prejudicial. So if it's more probative over here than it is prejudicial, the scale goes this way. Now, well, the scale goes one way or the other. Pick whatever side you want. If something's more probative than it is prejudicial, it comes into court. If it's more prejudicial than it is probative, then it goes out of court. It's not allowed in. So apparently back then, in the 2013-2015 trial, they tried to talk about the brothers' prior case, said it's way too prejudicial. It's not going to come in. Now they're appealing that. The alleged commission of independent crimes almost 2 years before the bombing had no reasonable prospect of altering the jury's recommendation that he receive the death penalty. During the trial, lawyers did not deny his role in the bombing. They said he was easily manipulated by his brother, a man they called the mastermind. Justice Department told the Supreme Court that an order to hold a new sentencing hearing would further traumatize the Boston community, which is a crock of garbage. Yeah, I hate that stuff. Further traumatized? Okay, it's a long time ago. All right, the victims will have to once again take the stand to describe the horrors that Tsarnaev inflicted on them. All right. Yes, I know it's hard, but this is the law. So get your ass into court and go testify about it. Now, the big question here, what is all surrounding all of this, is what's Joe Biden going to do? Because historically, he has been anti-death penalty, but he's also been really pro-crime punishment, very hard. So what's he going to do? This is kind of the first big question. The Supreme Court is going to hear about this stuff. Joe Biden, who vowed to abolish execution, has been urged recently to commute death row sentences. Approaches the midway point of his first 100 days, activists and civil rights groups are continuing to call on him to take action on ending the federal death penalty. 13 inmates were put to death in federal penitentiary during an unprecedented run of federal executions during the final months of Trump administration, which I condemned consistently. People who say you're an alt-right or Nazi, Rob, I condemn the Trump executions. I do not like the death penalty. And we talked about 2 of the cases here that Supreme Court botched and said, go ahead and kill those people. Now they're dead. So several were carried out during former President Trump's lame duck months, and the final 3 executions took place just days before Biden inauguration. We talked about all those. On a campaign website, Biden, a death penalty opponent, pledged that as president, he would work to pass legislation to eliminate the death penalty at the federal level and incentivize states to follow the federal government's example. But he has yet to speak on the issue since becoming president. He hasn't been speaking about much, so you can't really blame him on that. Campaigners are urging him to take more immediate action by formally reinstating the moratorium on the federal death penalty, as well as commute the sentences of those on federal death row. Earlier this week, Reverend Sharon Reicher, who lost her mother and other relatives to the Charleston church massacre, called on the president to stop federal executions, even though it would spare the life of their killer Dylan Roof. Abraham Bonowitz, the director of the Death Penalty Action, says the raising of the death penalty chamber at the prison would be a powerfully symbolic move for the president to take. It would send an unmistakable message that our government will no longer kill its prisoners. Governor Gavin Newsom in California passed out photos of the execution apparatus at San Quentin being carted away shortly after announcing that no prisoner would be executed on his watch. That's good. Oh, that's good there, Gavin. Gavin's only the only death penalties he's in favor of is his own governorship. He's basically executed himself out of the role of governor there. So nobody else will be executed after he's out of there. This comes from joebiden.com/justice. So this is on his website. I looked this up this morning. It says, eliminate the death penalty. All right, that's on his justice page on his website. Eliminate the death penalty. Over 160 individuals who've been sentenced to death in this country since 1973 have later been exonerated. Because we cannot ensure we get the death penalty cases right every time, Biden will work to pass legislation to eliminate the death penalty at the federal level and incentivize states to follow the federal government's example. These individuals should instead serve life sentences without probation or parole. And this page on his website was one of the most hilarious things I've seen recently. It's great. I mean, it's great. I agree with most of it that's on there. It's all about justice reform. But it's like somebody went on Twitter, like they hired an intern from someplace and they just were gathering tweets for like the last 6 months. Anything that had like hashtag justice reform in there, they just gathered everything. And they just gave it to some intern and said, hey, write all that down, put it in bullet points, slap it up on the website. Because it's like everything that you could possibly exist, that could possibly exist. No real rhyme or reason, kind of not a lot of interfacing or how they're going to roll this stuff out. It's just like a lot of good ideas all listed on a website. And what's so hysterical about it is it's the exact opposite of Joe Biden's life work, like literally. I mean, there's a quote from him that he says that every single crime bill that came out of Congress since 1976 had Joe Biden's name on it. And he's right. 1984 crime bill, 1986 crime bill, 1988 crime bill, which I think 1988 was the one that massively incarcerated African Americans because it specifically focused on crack cocaine. What demographic did that hit? Well, African American communities. One strike is enough. Basically, first offense, prison, 5-year mandatories, introduced mandatory minimums, introduced all of these problems that we're living with today. He's now trying to unring that bell. It's been 30 years of criminal justice destruction from Joe and Kamala. And now they have this whole thing on his website. Oh, we're going to fix everything. All right, that's good. That's good, guys. Listen, I hope so. I hope they come to it. I hope they get all this stuff done because I got a lot of problems with our justice system. Not all of it. There's a lot of insane stuff on there too, but you get my point. Just a major, major walking back of 30 years of all of the legislation that he passed. They're trying to unring that bell, and for good cause. And so lastly, the last little thing we wanted to talk about, death row inmate await Biden's promise to end federal execution. So there are people who are literally sitting there seeing what he wants to do. Through notes passed under cell doors with string and conversations whispered through air ducts, death row prisoners in Indiana are debating whether Joe Biden will fulfill his campaign promise to halt federal executions. Biden hasn't spoken publicly about capital punishment since taking office 4 days after the Trump administration executed the last 13 inmates. Oh my gosh, Trump. He's just on his way out, just making sure that business is getting done. At the penitentiary where federal death row inmates are held, that 6-month run of executions cut the unit from 63 to 50. Biden's campaign website said he would work to end federal executions, but he has not specified how. Yeah, there's nothing on his website that tells you how they're going to do any of this stuff. It's all great, right? It's justice reform, racial equity, blah, 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 blah. Doesn't mean anything to anybody. All right, so let's take a look at, see if we can get some of these questions working. Miss Faith is back there trying to fix my slides in real time. Let's see if this one works. And all right, so we do have some questions, but we're not going to get into any of these today. All right. So yeah, the problem is they're all out of order. All right. So I apologize that there were no questions today. We're going to get some questions. If you're on Clubhouse, then I may answer some of those questions when we hop off right here. Been having a lot of technology problems today, like just technology problems driving me bananas, like bananas. I was going to throw my computer outside the window today because it just wasn't, the screen wasn't coming on. I've had this computer for a year. It just, every time I turn it on, the screen comes on. Now it's not working. Now I come in here, slides aren't working. No questions. I'm not happy about it. But we're going to be back tomorrow. We're going to figure out the technology problems, and we're going to have a great show with a lot of great questions. So if you want to ask those questions, the best place to do that is over at locals.com. I apologize for those of you who I did not get to your questions today. We'll get to them tomorrow. Maybe I'll make a little video here after the program where I'll run through some of your questions, and we'll figure it out. I'm irritable about it. Can you tell I'm irritable about this? That's all right. All right. So let me thank everybody who is supporting us over on locals.com. These are the tremendous people who have been supporting the program. And this is a subscription platform over at watchingthewatchers.locals.com. If you want to check it out, awesome people who are all helping us keep the train on the tracks, as it were, over here. Let's say hi to Ad Baron. Let's say hi to Barbie Ann Cavor. We've got Drag. We've got Bumma Lickit. We've got SF Bob. We have Jax842. We have It's Ed. We've got Onion. And we have a couple new people who signed up over the weekend. I want to give a nice warm welcome to Alan is a 9 and WV Duck Chick. And that's it. That's it for everybody. Got Norovira in the house. Got a couple emails from you. Anki Woe in the house. Good to see everybody. And I want to thank, of course, Miss Faith Joy for the show prep and the assistance, and Mr. Ma Fox for all of the love in the chat, keeping the train on the tracks. We have some good things you can get if you sign up over at Locals. Grab a copy of my book. There's a free PDF over there that you can download. No issues there. You can also get a copy of the slides. Everything that I just went through is available there. Download a copy of any impeachment party documents if you want them. Also, grab my existence systems. I'm turning this into something that is a much bigger project. I was working on this over the weekend, and I'm pretty excited about where this is going. So I want to unveil that. If you want to get in early, then just go grab this. It's totally free, and it's available to use. That's over at locals.com. Check it out, Watching the Watchers group, and links and conversation, as well as other great people. A lot of good stuff happening over there. A lot of great communities. We're building the next generation, folks. So go on over to locals.com and sign up and join the community there. And before we get out of here, lastly but not leastly, I am a criminal defense attorney here at the R&R Law Group, where my team and I, over the course of many years, have represented a lot of people. What do? We help them find safety, clarity, and hope in their cases and in their futures. And we love what we do. We're very good at it. We have a passion for helping good people. We can help people with any type of crime. Things like drugs, alcohol, domestic violence, some of the Old Town crimes, or the 6th Street crimes, or the 5th Street crimes, or the whatever street you have in your city. Things like disorderly conduct, criminal trespass, urinating in public, theft, all those types of issues. Minor crimes, minor felonies, major felonies. If you need to clear up something on your past, if you've got an old mugshot you need removed from the internet, if you want to restore your rights so that you can go vote again, or go possess a firearm again, or go apply for some federal benefits, if you have an old warrant that you need to quash and eliminate, we have a whole team of people here who can help you with that. We offer free case evaluations. We really love to help people. It's what keeps us motivated. We've got an awesome team of people here that we've been sort of cultivating over the years, and very proud of what we've built. So if you or somebody you know or love needs help in Arizona, we'd be honored and humbled if you sent them our way. We'll make sure we take very good care of them. And that is it from me, everybody. Quick show note. I forgot to mention this at the beginning of the program. We will not be here on Thursday or Friday. I have a conference. I know it's the worst. Actually, this is going to be a good one. I have to go to a conference. I'm going to be out of pocket all day Thursday, all day Friday, most of the day Saturday. And so I'm not going to be able to do a live stream. I am going to try to do a couple pre-recorded videos that are going to be case updates. I think that we're due up for updates on Ghislaine Maxwell. We're due for an update, a little bit of an update maybe on Rittenhouse. There are a couple other ones that we've been following that we'll be updating on. I'm not intending to do a live show because I get out of the conference basically right at the same time that I'm supposed to be going live here. And that is obviously a conflict of interest, or a conflict of calendars. So just a little bit of a heads up. Won't be here Thursday, Friday. Want to make that known now. We will be trying to get some other videos out, maybe if I can get to them. But that's it for me, everybody. I want to thank you so much for being a part of the show today. Apologies that the technology was not working. I'm going to go try to sort that out here in a minute. But we are going to hop on Clubhouse right now. So we're going to spend about 30 minutes there answering any questions. If you want to join Clubhouse, there is a link below. If you have an iPhone. If you do not have an iPhone, then there's nothing to join, or an iOS or an iPad. It's iPhone only. But I'm learning some pretty cool things. So Telegram just rolled out some of the same functionality on their platform, meaning you can raise your hands and have these very sort of impromptu, ephemeral, I can never say that word right, ephemeral conversations that happen. And so that is rolling out. I think Twitter is also rolling this out. So this type of functionality is coming soon. We're just using it because the only place that I know where it exists is on Clubhouse. And once this opens up to a different platform, if Clubhouse does not open up, we'll open this up to everybody and we'll get on a different platform that works for everybody. So that is forthcoming. We are going to hop on Clubhouse right now, so I will see you there. Yeah, if not, we'll be back here same time, same place tomorrow. It is going to be 4 p.m. Arizona time, which is now Pacific time. So it's 4 p.m. on the West Coast, 5 p.m. Mountain time, 6 p.m. Central in Texas, 7 p.m. on the East Coast. And for that one Florida man, everybody, thank you so much for being a part of the program. I will see you right back here tomorrow. Bye-bye.